Welcome to our speaker round, as introduced already. And can we have also Mark Jägers here with us via the video link? Oh yeah, we see Mark already. Hey. Greetings to Rotterdam. Thanks a lot for being on board with us, Mark. Actually, it was introduced that Daniel Brutti, the Vice President of Global Logistics from Lansing, will be with us. But unfortunately, the COVID crisis hit him personally very much. So all the best to Daniel in case he's watching us virtually. And we wish him a good recovery. And in logistics, the most important thing is to be flexible and to find a solution, right? And so thanks a lot to Mark being on board with us. Mark is sitting in Rotterdam and is representing RHI Magnesita for us today. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, Lansing is also missing as of this, and we have Karl Hausteiner from Visio Semiconductors live on stage, Johannes Mikula from C.H. Robinson, and Bernhard Schmaldienst from Transporion. Our topic will be winning in supply chain management, why digitalization matters. And, you know, in our industry, for years we are talking about digitalization, and we have bits and pieces here and there. But what we want to show you and what we want to deliver is real best practice examples. And with our guys here on stage, I would like to jump into the topic immediately. Bernhard, maybe you as Transporion, you are living digitalization basically. So give us an overview. What is the situation at the moment from your point of view?
We'll happily do that. Yeah, thank you and good morning to everyone. Really happy to be here, also with a virtual and on-site event again. So happy to be with real people in the room. Yeah, digitalization and why does it matter? Maybe starting with the good news, because we are not that often hearing about good news, right? Good news is we still got so many potential in supply chain management that could be leveraged by digitalization that there's still a lot of work to do. If we just consider how our industry is structured, studies show that about 30% of the entire logistics market are inefficiencies. So if we take the entire money spent on logistics and supply chain management, it would be about 30% of those money just going out for inefficiencies. If we take the European road freight market, those 30%, they would account for 60 billion euros. So there is quite a playground that we are all in and that we can work in. Where does all this inefficiency come from? We are a very traditional industry, historically. It's changing a lot recently. This inefficiency comes from empty runs. Capacities are not fully utilized or greatly used. We still have a lot of processes that, if you consider your personal life experience with mobile, how you're interacting on the B2C level, still seem a little bit outdated and quite old-fashioned. So we get something to do on the process side as well. In the interaction between the companies, waiting times, it's asynchronous planning processes that leads to waiting on both sides of the line, whether these are carriers, forwarders, or shippers. So overall, there's quite a lot of things happening. And finally, still to mention it, because it's also a topic of our event here, sustainability. Of course, our industry has a significant CO2 or emission footprint, and that's something that we need to tackle in our world as well. Good, so maybe that is a quick intro on where are we, what is the potential. Another question might be, what is Transporion doing about this, or what are other digital companies doing about this together with forwarders, carriers, and shippers? So our vision is to be the leading net zero digital logistics platform, and platform is a very important word in here, because it's all about connecting. From what we've seen in digitalization in the last years, I would say a lot of companies have done really good progress on optimizing themselves or maybe their closest partner network. So this is where a lot of inefficiencies have been removed. But if we put this on a broader scale, there are still a lot of inefficiencies by parties interacting with each other. And this is why our mission at Transporion is to bring transportation in sync with the world by connecting, as of now, 1,300 shippers with 140,000 carriers in a network that offers end-to-end capability. And here also to open the stage to everyone else, what does that mean? It really starts early in the process when people think about, we might want to have a new distribution channel. We need to open a new factory because demand is hitting us. How could we plan? Where could we get proper market intelligence, for example? What are proper rates? Where are we here? Once this is settled and we move from planning a little bit more to actually procuring and working with partners, you need to execute, you need to run your tenders, you need to fill your spot need in the transportation segment. This is happening. And then, and I think we've hardly been in the media that much as supply chain management or logistics industry as in the last years, because there have been heavy disruptions, and heavy disruptions means need for action. You need to have insights, ideally on a real-time base, to just act. And then, at some point in time, it was mentioned, we can discuss about the service level. Nevertheless, freight at some point in time, it needs to be paid, and then it's about an efficient process to have the money flowing. So if we cover this end-to-end process, this is where we are here as a digital platform, supporting on all stages, and would be really interesting to hear what the other colleagues are saying about that.
Thank you very much, Bernhard. Just the topic is pretty wide, right? And in order to structure it a little bit for you guys, we said we tried to put it into three main topics. One would be freight procurement, one would be execution, and the last part would be freight auditing, invoicing process, cost allocations. So when we go into procurement, obviously the last 2 years changed the whole industry. So Karl, from your point of view, did you change your procurement process as of the COVID crisis? You stick to the same processes?
Well, I think the answer is pretty simple and clear. Given the situation and the environment we're in, there was a clear force to change our freight procurement processes, right? When early on we used to have an RFQ every year, once a year. Nowadays we were forced, actually 2 years ago, we were forced to change that to an almost monthly rhythm, right? So every month, and I have to say, we are doing most of our freight on air freight, and the majority of our air freight comes from Asia. So these are really the critical lanes for some time now. And we had to go and change our frequency for the RFQs. We are now doing it on a monthly basis for our most critical volume lanes from Asia. And we have another set of lanes, which we call the Tier 2 lanes. Those we are doing an RFQ for every 3 months, right? So how can we manage this, relatively numerous RFQs? How can we do the analysis? How can we make decisions? We have about, all in all, we have about 280 lanes which we are putting in the RFQs. So a long time ago, long time means before 2014, we were managing the RFQs and making our decisions with the help of Excel, right? You can imagine how difficult this is for 280 lanes. Back then, in 2014, we had got in touch with Transporion, and since then we are using this freight procurement platform of Transporion, which now in these times allow us really, if an RFQ is terminated on Friday evening, Central European time, I basically can have the analysis results on Saturday, next day. One colleague of mine, he's located in Shanghai, he's coordinating our RFQs and he can do the analysis pretty much on the spot. So we have results very quickly. We then get together within the logistics management team of Vichy and make our decisions. So with that tool, I think it is still okay for us to make sound decisions, which we basically base on, cost is one priority, of course, especially in these times, but also on the performance records we have with our providers. So yes, definitely the way we procure air freight, I'm speaking air freight mainly, has changed a lot, has become very dynamic. Our partners need to be flexible, and we are really glad to have basically a pretty wide range of partners which we can work with in these difficult times. And partners change, almost every month, right? Because the conditions which can be offered are so fluid, so different, really.
Thank you very much, Karl. So basically a completely new approach and only possible because of digitalization, right? If you would still work with Excel, it would be impossible to do this monthly.
Absolutely right. I mean, when thinking back to the years before 2014, making an analysis in Excel for 280 lanes, it took us days. And then you were not sure whether the results were really correct, right? So what was the basis for your decision making, right? So this is a big advantage, I can really, I have to say, and we will continue to work with it. Thank you,
thank you. Mark, can you give us a few words on the approach of RHI Magnesita? Is digitalization supporting your procurement?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think that the story that Karl just told for a part also applies to how we look at things. We're also making use of Transporion procurement platform for a number of years already. What we do see, especially over the past 24 months, is that also the frequency in which we bid out has increased. So what we now see, especially on the land freight activities, that we bid out on a monthly to quarterly basis, which is a much higher frequency than we had before. And on ocean freight, we also do that on a quarterly basis there. Where we then also separately look at certain adjustments of specific factors like BF, for instance, there. Furthermore, also we try to look at more index price basing there, and that's where also platforms like Transporion can be very beneficial. One thing that quite recently we start to include in tendering as well is that we look at let's say a bit of new development in our company is to look more at the service menu setup. And what we mean by that is that we try to procure different levels of service, which also include, for instance, low CO2 emission type of services, so that we can start offering to our customers the option to either, let's say, use our standard transport means, or even a low emission standard, low emission transport. So that's quite new development, which we are also including now in our procurement setup.
Thank you very much, Mark. So different transport modes, but it looks like similar approach, right? Because obviously with your goods, what you are moving, you are much more in land transport and in sea freight, and Karl and Visha are much more in air freight. But it seems you need to act much quicker, you need to go out with much more RFQs than ever before. And you mentioned a pretty interesting thing, it's a kind of index-based pricing. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, Lansing cannot be with us today, but in our preparation rounds, they told us, for example, that they have in sea freight a different approach. They are going for very long-term contracts. They have 2-year contracts and even 5-year frame contracts. But they very, very much work on index-based pricing. And I think especially if you look at the energy costs, on diesel costs, on the fluctuations in the market, that is a very, very important approach. Johannes, from a freight forwarding perspective, it seems the technology, the digitalization supports the big shippers a lot with getting quick analysis on freight rates, on service levels. Mark just said it's easy now to ask for different service modes and make a decision here. How is this from freight forwarding side? So in the past you had to fill one RFQ per year. Now you have to fill one RFQ every week, or how is it from your point of view?
Well, it's very much like this, Christoph, and it depends as well of the customer size and the business segments you're tapping into. Air freight is of course different than ocean freight, and so is land transportation. But if I may relate it a bit more to our background and home market in the United States, because I think that's where a big difference comes into the game here, is looking at the European shippers or Central and Eastern European shippers. Here you see the more spot ad hoc base, really shipment by shipment. Of course, forced to a certain point by the market environment, but when you look on the US side, on the importer side, it's a bit different. Why? Because looking on the US side, you have a very big compliance and US customs field. And this is a very crucial topic. And for us in logistics, of course, track and tracing and all the other connectivities are a given. But where we, especially as C.H. Robinson, make a big difference in the United States, in our home market, is that connectivity with US customs, with our trade compliance specialist. And really, this is where we have our heaviest and longest discussions with the customers. And at the same time, lots of our digitalization investments are going in tools for that particularly. We just launched a new software, artificial intelligence, that screens your entire entries that you do in the US and puts it against the newly released tariff section from the US government, where you can easily see, okay, is there still a tariff on your product, right? Is there a chance that you get duty refunds from US customs? And if you would do this all manually, I think you would need thousands of people to do that. And you cannot do this, like you said correctly, Carl, on Excel sheets anymore. So you really need to invest money into that. And that's where we are pretty strong with our compliance teams and as well our software technologies for that.
All right. So that means you try to give added value to your customers beside of the monthly RFQs they are sending to you, right?
We have to, and like I said, especially there is the big difference talking to US BCOs and European BCOs. Yeah. US BCOs on the receiving side, they say, you know what, C.H. Robinson, it's your headache, go and find me a solution. Whereas when you go to shippers here in Europe, they have to struggle and they have to fight. So it's as well a bit of a different and market environment, different approach, driven by the market environment and circumstances, and it just depends of what market and what lane you are tapping into.
Right. Bernhard, we heard that RHI, Magnesita, and Visio both are using for procurement the Transporion platform. Can you give us a little insight what makes your competitive advantage here? Why is it working that well?
Yeah, we started early. So as said, the original freight procurement initiatives, they date back a little bit more than 10 years ago when those products were launched. So we were among the first movers. And then we always had a clear product focus. And as mentioned, and I was happy to hear from Mark, for example, mentioning this index topic, or also mentioning topics like, where could we be in the future? What about our sustainability? What about our CO2 emissions? And the current success is one thing. What we really need to look into now is about how can we drive the future? And here I think we really got something interesting. It was mentioned core criteria for selecting or for procuring freight are very often quality and price. Yeah, very often price driven if it's easy comparable, but also the quality aspect. We see more and more demand to adding a third factor, namely sustainability, just to raise the bar. So that's something that is happening. Plus, Johannes, you mentioned, yes, we are doing more and more quotes right now, but what does it mean? It also drives the inefficiencies because you need to quote more often. So in a two-sided market, we need to look that we can do matchings and quoting way more efficient in the future than we do now. So we call our also AI and machine learning, that I have dropped the buzzwords, enabled autonomous procurement platform. But what does it mean at the end of the day? It shouldn't be about sending emails to 10 parties and then getting replies. We are beyond that already. But the next stage would really be to automate the bidding and quotation process for the entire industry. And here, indexes help, like we are offering the biggest European FTL index platform with Transporion Insights. This is one important part to have it longer running. Plus, it's also very important on the procurement side. make it efficient for both sides, really consider the network effect. And if we make this, the maturity level will increase a lot.
I agree to most of what you said, Bernhard, in that sense, but there is one significant factor that we need to consider here is in today's market, it's capacity.
Yes.
Right? That works perfectly if there is sufficient space, if there is enough empty containers left and right, but in a market like this, you just need to look as well into the solution on the spot basis that you're getting in, and I think this is where the challenge will come in, and where shippers and as well all the networks need supports and are really eager to invest more money into digitalization to get more out of it.
Correct, it's planning and capacity and direct access to this capacity. You're right, that's another big potential that we are seeing. If you have a nice rate, but you never get it on a ship, you still lose, right? So it's all about, having a proper rate and it still works. So capacity is king as of now, and that might shift. Yeah, we've seen different times, but it's important to work in both markets.
Maybe an interesting aspect also from my side, the experience we have made now the past 2 years and also before to some extent. It seems that as we're using this platform, right, more and more logistics providers, forwarders are really interesting to participate in our RFQs. Because obviously, right, it creates a certain standard for the quotes also, and it makes it easier for them as well. So for us, it's good. We have, more quotes we can choose from.
And the funny thing is they have to pay for it, right?
Well, that's funny. No, it's just fair, I would say.
I mean, further to that, what you said, Bena, as well on the capacity on the trucking, right?
Yeah.
And we are running as well big investments in the United States into platforms and digitalization tools. Especially in the US, there is between 25 and 30% of the entire driven mileage in the United States are empty miles. Yes. So meaning that really every third mile, so to speak, truckers are driving with an empty truck, and we don't need to figure out and what that means economically for the environmental footprint and all that. And this is where we just invented a new tool called Infinity. This is where we provided a platform for the truckers where shippers and as well our operations people can post loads what they have, and the truckers on the app what they have, they can say, oh, it's over there, I go there and pick it up. They can place the bid or even accept the rate what's in there. Why is that so important? In Europe we are more sophisticated with forwarders and trucking companies having solutions in regards to IT. But in the US, we need to consider that around 85% of the trucking companies have less than 5 trucks. And I doubt that these trucking companies, that these people will be investing a lot into technology. So they are heavily reliant on tools and platforms, what especially we as C.H. Robinson are offering to them. And we are kind of duplicating this as well into the European market. It's early stages, but that's what we are coming to Europe as well very soon with that.
Pretty interesting, and I think that's a pretty good bridge already to our second topic, execution, right? As you said earlier, the one thing is to get an interesting rate on the table, but the second thing is to get the cargo really moved and to get space allocation. What does it help to have a pretty good rate when finally the container is locked on a vessel in front of Shanghai, for example? Or you have a pretty good air freight rate, but suddenly there are no more flights from this and this city because of some COVID lockdowns again or whatever. So where can digitalization today really support your business in freight execution on your day-to-day process? When we look at it maybe from a shipper's perspective, Mark, that you are still with us, right, in Rotterdam?
Yeah, I'm still here, don't worry.
How would you judge this for RHI Magnesita?
No, it's a thing that is highly on our radar right now. As we speak, we're currently going through a multi-year logistics transformation project in our company, whereby we're implementing technology tools. We're implementing a global transport management system, which is also connected to various visibility platforms there. So what we really try to achieve with that is that on the one hand, that we get much more predictive information, so that not only let's say, we're better in controlling what we do from a day-to-day, but even further that we can be more proactive in what we do. In the current environment where we are, let's say, not at the highest level of automation yet, we are often, let's say, surprised about what's happening, delay of vessels, containers standing on a terminal, etc., etc. And through the digitization that we're going through and the connection to visibility platforms, we believe that we can be much more proactive, which also means that we can reduce inefficiencies and costs there. Besides that, we're also implementing a logistics network modeling tool there, whereby we can also use our historical data and market data to further look at the tactical level, how we can better execute our processes. So yeah, digitization is for us absolutely an important improvement in how we manage our day-to-day business, and also how we can control the crises that we have on our plate every day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we see a real competitive advantage for you guys as of digitalization. Carl, would you see a similar picture for Vishay?
Well, in Vishay, we are using a transportation management system since 2002. We have continuously improved it. However, I think we are now at a stage where not only ourselves, but also the system gets a bit older, and we need to look for replacement, not only of ourselves, but also of the system. So our plan is now, because the TMS we're using now is an interface solution, right? We are looking to change to a more integrated solution. We're working with SAP. We are trying to get to an integrated module, help us with transportation management. The challenges I still see is, when we talk digitalization, what do we really talk about? Do we talk about only our internal own digitalization? Or can we think about digitalization across companies, maybe across the globe, across all functions in a supply chain? Very often, and you had talked about brokerage before in the US, very often today, visibility ends at customs, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So how can we get to a real integrated global digitalization, right, in our supply chain management processes? I think this is the challenge, and I'm not sure we'll get there in the next 5 years. It will be a journey, I think, but this needs, in my opinion, this needs to be the goal. We, from a Vishay perspective, we are, trying to optimize our internal digitalization with our direct partners, right? What I miss sometimes is also standardization in the industry, right? Because for me, digitalization requires standardization before, right? Then it really becomes effective, efficient, right? So I think there is a long way to go, and probably we need to also put this on a different level, really, because, logistics providers, forwarders, right? Of course, they're all competitors to some extent, right? But at the same time, for the benefit of supply chain management, we should be looking at some level of standardization across everyone, right? Other organizations have achieved this, right? I think we need to work on that in the forwarding industry as well.
I fully agree with that, Carl, but when we reflect a bit, we are talking here about digitalization here on this level, and there are lots of fields in our industry that are still there, and that's a crucial infrastructure, right? And this is as well digitalization that we are missing in presenting data and working with data. I give you one example, and I think that speaks for the entire nightmare that's happening in the United States, is especially in Long Beach, you have 4 terminals, right? And then you have, I think, 15 or 20 chassis pool providers. And all of them are using a different IT tool, right? So if you want to have a chassis, you need to go on this tool, and then you have to get an appointment on that terminal. Oh, that's not working, then you need this, then you need that. And you know what's happening right now? The truck drivers, they shifted back to Excel sheets because it was impossible for them to really monitor all those appointments on those 4 terminals and those 20 chassis pools. And you get the chassis on a Monday, but you get the appointment only for Friday in that port. And we are talking here digitalization in the United States, in the largest port of the United States. So I think this is where there is still a lot of homework that needs to be done on the ground floor.
Yeah, interoperability, it's really a bad word for our industry. Yeah, we are not used to this. And historically, yeah, good example, there were a lot of point-to-point connections. But what does it mean? It's multiplying. The more complex your supply chains and networks get, if you're collaborating with hundreds of parties, which is easy for any supply chain, you would have to connect with 100 parties due to a lack of standardization in the worst case scenario. So this is where we're coming from, and it's really about unification and teaming up and making companies working better together on all stages, whether this is a customs authority, a port provider, or an LSP. Yeah, it's in all stages.
Very true.
Do we see a trend, Bernhard? I mean, do we see initiatives for this standardization? I know many, as Carl said before, really good solutions, but in a box. You know, and we have so many different boxes, like Johannes said, on one port only, right? But do you see a trend that we have at least a way towards standardization in the industry, or everybody tries to cook his or her own soup?
We are not yet there, but the trend is positive from what I'm saying. Just to give an example, and this goes a little bit into digital sustainability emission reporting, if we have an Alice Foundation where basically all the big forwarders and a huge amount of big shippers globally are connected and agree on standard, how could we do emission reporting? This kind of creates a standard. There is no standardization organization behind it, but if some organization gets big enough just to have this network effect kicking in, people are using it, and it's easy for everyone to jump on that one. So here, for the first time, I see a really good opportunity. It's not saying we will make it, but we have a good opportunity that at least for such an important topic like what do we do to our planet, we might end up with quite a better standardization than before. We also see more like in the software industry, this would have been open source initiatives where also competitors team up together. We see more like that, like an Open Logistics Foundation, etc. It's coming, but it's far from being there. Plus on top, we also try to play a role by, if you connect to Transporion, if you send a transport order, it's always like this. We are already connecting 150,000 partners in a network at least. Not saying that this is complete yet, but it's also a journey where we want to provide a benefit for both sides again. Yeah, it's like always there's a service receiver and then there is someone requesting the service. So it's both sides need to interact, and then in the process it's not two parties only. This happens multiple times throughout the supply chain.
Right, right. And, you know, every journey starts with the first step. Mark, what is your experience at RHI Magnesita on standardization and freight execution? How do you deal with it?
Well, I always say that the problem of logistics is that the only standard that we have is that there is no standard. That is the, I'm 30 years in the logistics business now, and I've seen many, let's say, efforts indeed where we started a journey, but it's always fragmented or it dies in beauty somewhere, and that makes it very complex. So if you go through these journeys like standardization, and it's not only on the technology side, but it's even on simple things like rate structures. And there's absolutely no common ground, and everybody is working more or less in its own little kingdom or own vision on where it needs to go to. That's very complex. That also, I think, that keeps a lot of people in business, of course, because of that, new innovations become apparent, and new people start new journeys there. But for instance, if you look at what we're doing right now in the implementation of our transport management system and the global transformation we're going through, the only real thing that you can do as a large shipper is to try to set some of the standards yourself. And again, if I only look at, for instance, rate structures, if I would go out to all our service providers there and ask them to come up with the proposal themselves, I get probably hundreds of different versions, which you can never compare. So there, in the digitization journey that we go through, we set certain standards. So not only on rate structures, but also how they communicate with us. So in our platform, that's why I think platform is so important, is that we set the connectors there. So we say you connect with us through this platform, and it's the only way you can work with us in the future. So in a certain way, I think you have to take that into your own hands. But again, that doesn't mean that what we are doing is a industry standard. It's just trying to use what's in the market and try to force others to go that same journey. But it's a huge problem in I think in logistics, and that's also why there is so enormous inefficiency in this business still.
Yeah, thank you. Most probably it's also a matter of size, right? Because RHI, Magnesita, you are definitely in the position, let's say, to force people to use your platform, and you say either you do it or you're not in the business. Maybe also similar, Carl, for you, you have a certain power, obviously. If we are talking about smaller companies who don't have this huge shipping volume, obviously it will be much more difficult to find a way without the standardization in our industry at the moment. Where are the limits in digitalization when we talk about freight execution on day-to-day level nowadays? Would you say in certain areas, in certain transport modes, or in certain situations, the best digitalization in the world still does not work or does not help at all? What is your experience? Where does the digitalization end and we need people?
Maybe I can add one statement here. For me, it really, and probably you would agree, it really always takes three things, right, to make something work, right? It's a process, a system, but it's also people, right? And you know, you can digitalize whatever you like, right? If you don't have the people behind it who, you know, put the final touch on the performance, right? Who take care of you as a customer, then, you know, what does digitalization help, right? So I feel we will still need all the three pillars, which I say it now. And of course, digitalization can help us to become more efficient, right? In making our decisions also. But we certainly will continue to need good people who support the business, who support the customers. And I mean, the other gap I still see, we had discussed it now, is digitalization is mostly internal so far, maybe with an external partner, but it doesn't go further than that.
Yeah.
So this is a limitation, a clear lack of standards. We had discussed it. These are limitations in my eyes.
And there is a physical aspect, right? So just imagine the perfect play. You have planned everything. You have the perfect prediction. Everything is fine. And then the truck driver is sick. Yeah, I mean, it will not help you, or it will not save you entirely, but it still will help you. I will correct myself here, because you can react faster, you can take action, and if it's perfectly, the company will know immediately that the driver is sick, send some replacement. So even here, it will not push us maybe to 100% efficiency, yeah, but we can get quite close to that.
I think that's a good bridge, Christoph, if I may jump on that, when you said the truck driver may be sick. I think this is where we don't know today what the limits are in digitalization. We just recently partnered up in the US with Waymo, and we are developing with them a pilot project of autonomous trucks. Really autonomous trucks going from Dallas to Houston. Why Dallas to Houston? Because that's one of our strongest lanes where we have sufficient historical data to say, okay, we can do that. We know how to steer the software, and we see that there will be a big demand for that. I mean, will be the market ready for that tomorrow? No, but that's for sure a future where digitalization as well will go. Customer facing needs to remain with people, no doubt about that. But operations and execution, what's the topic here? I truly believe that we will see more and more autonomous trucks. Why? yes, digitalization, scaling, cost efficiency, but as well the availability of truck drivers. That's something what we just cannot neglect, and that's not only valid for the United States, it's the same thing here in Europe, and more so now with the situation in Russia and Ukraine, where a lot of Eastern European drivers are missing. So just looking at the fact that the average age of a truck driver is plus 50, yes. 52. So they will retire at some point, and the gap that young drivers are coming into the industry, we don't see that happening. Why? Because there are lots of studies that show that younger generation, so to speak, 21, that was supposed to enter the truck driving market, that they are going, yes, IT, software and all that, but at the same time we see that they are being dragged into a field of driving drones or steering drones. That's as well something what affects our operations in freight forwarding. So I think it's very hard to say where the limits are for digitalization in that sense, and it's for sure a very, very interesting journey, and I think we all can agree that we see this day to day on all the investments that all of us are doing in our business, and I just hope that it will pay off at some time in a unified standard solution, what you just said.
Pretty interesting. How far are we away, Johannes? You have an outlook. When will the first autonomous trucks drive between Dallas and Houston?
Well, it's in early stages, right? I mean, it's not that you just say, hey, here is the truck and go. That's easy. You can have the truck driving, but at the same time, what we are doing is we are investing as well in the infrastructure behind, because that means the shipper or the receiver needs to be ready that there is no truck driver. So there is no one to yell at that he's late or something like that, right? So we all have to be ready for that. And as well that no one is there to unload the freight from the truck, because that's as well a common habit nowadays, that the truck driver, even depending on terms, whatever, that the truck driver at some point is forced to unload the pallets, like it or not. It's just how the standards have developed. Is it his legal obligation? No, but it's just common practice to do so. And I think this is where we see lots of things to be done, but at the same time, we invest in that technology, because we truly believe, and it will be a key differentiator moving forward, especially on heavy core lanes, which is really hub-to-hub traffic.
Yeah, agree on the capability, and it might not happen in a big bang that all the trucks suddenly drive autonomously. It might happen on the big lanes, as you say, and then hub-to-hub, it will be happen quite soon. I still have an open bet with a colleague by when it will happen, and I got for the earlier year, because it will happen on a hub-to-hub base. The technology is nearly there. It's mainly about getting proper regulations, what happens in case of an accident, etc. Here, Europe is especially low. US is more mature. Maybe Europe, with the exception of Sweden, they're quite moving. But this is where we are. We will see that soon, and then maybe as a second maturity, okay, then let's go to the household, or let's go to the last mile. But that will only be second, third stage, whatever we will see. But hub-to-hub will be there soon.
Well, I read that Tesla wants to have autonomous taxis by 2024. So that's not that far away, right? And I believe taxis is much more difficult than a truck on hub transport, with taking last mile distribution out of the picture now. So the future is happening now. Anything you want to add to freight execution and digitalization? Let's come to the last point we wanted to discuss on freight cost allocations, invoicing processes, auditing. How do you deal with this? We see so many different rates when we started at the procurement side, more RFQs, index-based pricing, so that means that all the administrational efforts are getting higher and higher, right? So at the end, when it is about to pay the bill, what is happening there?
Well, on the Vichy side again, we are doing freight bill auditing in our TMS, not for 100% of all the shipments, all the bills, but for the majority of it. I see a couple of improvements which we will implement in the new TMS for sure. Of course, now with the high frequency of RFQs, right, this becomes, as you said, more of a workload than ever. The challenges I see in our present system environment is also, you change the tariffs so quickly, the rate so quickly, right? Every month potentially, right? Now you need to update your TMS with the new tariff, right? To get bills audited correctly, right? So there is a couple of thoughts how this can be improved and automated also. But we are not there yet. With the new TMS, I think we will be much, much better. And the thing is, of course, the amount of freight bills and the complexity of the different tariffs of the different transport modes, etc. And here we go again to the standardization, and I think Mark said it right. Also, transport standards in rate structures, right? Yes. Would be so important, right? It would make things much, much easier. But in our case, or shippers with a higher volume, there is no chance you can manually audit all the invoices. It's impossible, right? So you need a system to help you with that. And then, the thoughts go further, right? Once you have audited the invoice, now you can put the allocation structure you have in SAP, in our case, right? And use this structure and allocate the cost already to your product lines as much as possible. So these are the thoughts we have and which we will implement in the new TMS.
And maybe to add something to that, because we have a similar setup whereby we also use our transport management system to do that exercise. And I think here's an interesting also new development, and with especially the visibility tools that is helping actually to reduce the workload and the checking process there. Just to give you one example, we're connected to ocean visibility tools there, whereby we are clearly able to see if a container arrived on the terminal and when it has left the terminal. So with that actual data in our transport management system, we can pre-calculate what the actual demurrage cost will be, instead of us getting the invoice from the ocean line and then having to verify, is this actually correct? So in that sense, digitization is absolutely driving down the efforts on, say, manual checking of invoices, and you can, well, for a large part, automate it in the transport management systems. So for us, that is a huge driver in also being accurate on what we actually pay, but also prescribing to the external companies that work for us what we believe is the correct number that can be invoiced.
That's pretty interesting, especially as you said, kind of almost nowadays unpredictable costs like demurrage detention costs in ocean freight, right? Shipping lines are reducing 3 times to the absolute minimum, and we know that containers are piling up at the ports. Tomorrow afternoon we will have a panel discussion about resilience in global supply chains, where this will be one of the key topics there. And if you can somehow, with the support of digitalization, predict what is the potential costs coming out of this, this gives definitely a big advantage. Is there something, Bernhard, Johannes, from your side, how you support this kind of processes from a platform side, from a freight forwarding side?
I have to admit I'm biased because freight audit is one of the core areas I work in, and the challenge is really threefolded. So Mark, I also learned you have a background there, but it starts with right rate information, right? So a lot of companies have challenges with all the rate updates, etc., to properly maintain their rates. You're procuring hundreds, thousands of lanes on a monthly base with no standards from multiple partners potentially. So how do you maintain all this? So that's one challenge that we tackle, this rate unification and standardization to provide you with proper rate data. Then you need proper shipment information with all the exceptions that might incur additional costs. We discussed demurrage detention, could be waiting time, could be anything. So anything that affects the final rate being invoiced on top of the rate sheet. That's the second ingredient. And the third ingredient, and here there is the platform usage. If you have 50 partners on the freight forwarding side, the ideal process is still, of course, yes, you could do some carrier crediting, then your process is fine and ticked off, but it doesn't mean that the carrier process is fine immediately with that. So then it's again about connecting the parties, that the invoice data are sent electronically from all the participating player and do this match automatically. So that's the perfect play if you implement it, plus there are a lot of exception managements in between there. Yeah.
Right, right. A challenging topic. Johannes, you have some approach to support your customers on this part?
We absolutely do, and I think we can all agree that the biggest struggle and nightmare is nowadays in the ocean freight, right? Because land freight is pretty easy, simple, straightforward, to a very large extent. Here, for instance, we have on average in Europe 25% of our truckloads that we move, they are all automated process, right? Orders come in automatically through EDI, we place the order through EDI with truckers, invoices is being generated through EDI to the customer and receive it. So it's on the land freight side working pretty well. Air freight is a bit of a different environment, but ocean freight absolutely, and you hit a good nail on that, Christoph, with demurrage and detention. And I think this is the biggest struggle what we have. And frankly speaking, there is no real answer to that than just manual entry and manual audit process, especially for demurrage and detention. Ocean freight, THC and all that, pretty standard, pretty easy to review. Of course, you can argue with the steamship lines nowadays because they are changing as well the attitude and approach. It used to be the gate-in date what was important. Now it's obviously the sailing date, regardless how often they roll the freight. So this is where it's hard to have artificial intelligence reviewing that invoice. So you really need, again, like you said, and people checking this and having that personal and look into that invoice that you're receiving from the carriers. But other than that, of course, you have the audit process going through like we all have in our industry standards. But today's struggle remains demurrage and detention, and more so on the United States side. Why? Because of all the IPI situations. US BCOs have a different approach to that than European shippers, so to speak, because for the Americans, it's pretty normal to discuss and see demurrage detention invoices, where we see big struggles of discussing it with European shippers, so to speak, because it's a different approach, but the problem is still the same.
Right, right. I see we are coming to an end. 3 minutes, 36 seconds left for us, and we should stick to our timelines, at least roughly, as we are screening also online, and people are going in for the next panel discussions then. If you have one wish, let's say for Christmas, we are still in May, but maybe Santa Claus has more time to prepare till the 24th or 25th of December, regards of digitalization, what would it be?
Well, I would have more wishes. I guess one wish would be, let's get over this pandemic situation. Second wish would be, let's have peace again in Europe. Third wish, digitization, is, come on, let's get standardization in place more and more, so digitalization can really help us.
If I may continue, I fully agree. Most likely important thing in regards to digitalization would be to send a password to all the stakeholders to give peace again to the world. I think that would be wish number one that should come true immediately. And secondly, absolutely have more standardization in the entire process and system. Why? Because it makes life easier, and of course it will drive costs down again, that all we as companies are investing into that.
Yes. Let's really look into making it happen. Yeah, I think there are a lot of starting points. We are in a lot of areas already quite mature. Let's just continue doing it, keep push for it with the partner network, and then we'll get there.
Thank you. Mark, you want to add something?
Yeah, I fully concur with the previous speakers, also in the same order of wishes. So that's nothing to add there.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from our audience here? In Marriott Hotel, you can use Slido. You can send us your questions online, or you just shout out and let us know, and we will try to answer. Same is definitely valid also for our virtual visitors, and you have the great chance now to ask your questions, or we were so clear with all the statements here that you are happy. Thumbs up.
Too early for questions.
All right. If there are no questions coming in on Slido, if there are no personal questions, then I would like to thank you. Greetings to Rotterdam once again, Mark. Really great having you on board. Thanks for your time jumping in here. Greetings and thanks to everyone here. And we will have a short coffee break now for the people here in Marriott Hotel. Enjoy it. Interact, do some networking here, and we will be back afterwards with a keynote from Budapest Airport. Thank you very much.